Well, that's what you've been taught. And so for someone to come around and stand on a soapbox and give you platitudes of you just got to change your mindset and do this, it doesn't help anyone. It's going to be a short boost of adrenaline, but it doesn't create change. That's why I'm so not interested in being associated with motivational speaking.
Welcome to Get Real 411, the podcast where real experts give real advice on all things real estate. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Brad.
Join us as we explore real estate successes and pitfalls through the eyes of our esteemed guests.
Now let's get real.
And we're so excited to be joined today by Rene Rodriguez. Rene Rodriguez, an absolutely amazing industry professional and icon, author of Amplify Your Influence, CEO of Valentum, sends out the Neuro Innovator newsletter. If you're not subscribed, I suggest you do. It's a great read. And host of the Neuroside of Influence podcast, Neuroside of Influence and Leadership podcast. Rene, welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. I'm obviously a little selfish because I'm a student of Amplify myself, so I was excited to get a chance to talk with you today. I want to get right into it because I know that a lot of loan originators, real estate professionals, folks in sales roles, let's be honest, it's been a challenging year for a lot of folks. And a lot of these folks are out there in the market, having conversations and trying to get as many at-bats as they possibly can. One of the things that is a cornerstone of your teachings has been to know your audience, but moreover, to connect with your audience through storytelling. Tell us a little bit about why that is so important.
Well, I think I'm going to take a different approach to it than what you might even be expecting. Because I think storytelling, when we talk about that, people think story time around a fire. Yeah, that's storytelling. But storytelling is about managing a narrative and creating a narrative. And why is narrative important? We function and create reality based on narratives. So narratives are constructs of reality. It's the story we tell ourselves, right? Right now, I'm on a podcast with you guys. And that the importance of storytelling is that it puts context around situations. It helps us understand and put meaning to this. And so you started off with a narrative. It's been a challenging year. That is a narrative. I choose a different narrative. I go, this is normal business cycle shit. I was bullied as a kid. You know what? Awesome. It made me more compassionate. I've lost money. I've lost my entire business. That's part of the cycle of life, wins and losses. This might be a year of difficulty. And so to me, this is normal life. We just came off of something that was la la land where you could breathe and sneeze and get business. Now we got to work a little bit harder. Cool. And here's the other narrative to that I choose, which is those that are lazy right now, those that feel entitled in any sense of the word will not survive. And you know what that's going to be for them? A magnificent lesson for them. And the one that they probably need, because guess what? In my life, I have felt entitled and I didn't work hard on for certain things. And guess what? Things were taken away. And then I go, oh shit, I better work hard next time because I don't want that happening again. And so, but those who have been there and understand that, they're going, okay, this is just going to be a tough thing. I just got to ride this out and I got to push harder this time. That's a different narrative. And so for me, the words that come out of my mouth are so critical because they become the narrative and the narrative becomes my reality and my reality determines how I behave. And so for me, I just don't say those things. So that to me is storytelling. What I just did was tell a story, created a narrative. What's going on? Some stories are, I remember when I was a kid and growing up. Yeah, that's storytelling as well. But so is this. So I think it happens in a lot of different areas.
So Rene, look, storytelling, it's part of business. And what I think about when we talk about storytelling are two things. One, telling a story of where you're headed so that you can give somebody else, for example, a pitch, right? Pitching for investment. You want to tell a story so that they feel they're part of it, they can feel excited about it, and be willing to give you an investment. The other is the story of your life, your business life that got you where you're at. They give them the confidence to maybe make that investment. I think a lot of people get insecure about telling their story, right? Maybe they're ashamed of it. Maybe things didn't go the way they wanted it to. They're a little bit older than they thought they would be to achieve a certain something in life. What would you tell somebody like that maybe isn't confident enough to tell their story?
Well, I think that we all go through that process of really wondering. I think we all go through that process of really wondering if our story is meaningful. Because when you're living your story, which is living your life, we forget, because we're in the experience of it, that this is a story unfolding. This just becomes our daily life. I'll be able to tell the story of being on your podcast next week, but right now I'm just living it. And so I don't see it from that perspective. So I might be pulled on the emotional ups and downs of, as the story unfolds. But when we think about that concept of saying, okay, well, one, most people don't think their story is very valuable. And we think it, and the reason we don't is because we just lived it. I've heard people that had tragic stories and like, well, nobody wants to hear that. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? That's incredible that you survived that. And the the sense of humility, and also the sense of sort of the perspective, was it's just what I lived. And that's, I think we underestimate our resiliency as people. We underestimate the resiliency of kids. They go through horrific situations and come out great. Now, that doesn't mean that there's trauma and things like that, but who doesn't have that? Who doesn't have that? It's what we do with it. There's no way to avoid trauma. There's no way to avoid tragedy in life. In fact, I was telling my kids, I said, you know what, if happiness is your goal in life, you're going to be greatly disappointed for 99% of it. Most of
Right.
life isn't happy. Most of life is a grind. Most of life is a push. Most of life is overcoming challenges and adversity. And that's awesome if we learn to tell that story. Because if you look at all of the things, Jamie, who you are in your story, you were made through the adversities and the challenges you overcame, period. And the same goes for you. It's like all of those things made us who we were. And so when we're in those moments, it's going to be sad. It's going to be hard. Feel it, embrace it. Let it make you more compassionate. Let it make you more empathetic. Let it make you stronger, and let it and question, who are you in those moments? I mean, there's nothing more beautiful than an ego that humbling to say, okay, well, God, I messed that one up, and go, okay, but now can I be a good person through this? So I think in those cases it's easy for us to forget the power of our story. And that's where I think we mature, in the sense of saying, okay,
Yes.
it's not so much for me, but I need to share this story because maybe somebody else needs it. And so I need to move from myself into a servant mindset.
Yeah. And people don't realize that their story, they don't feel like it carries a lot of meaning.
Yeah,
But the reality is that story resonates with many other people that can tell a very
absolutely.
similar story, and it makes them feel good about themselves to hear they're not the only one that has gone through that.
And I
Well,
think
the
when
way that
they
you
realize
answered
that,
the,
oh, I was
yep.
going to say one thing. When they realize, don't forget what you're going to say. When they realize that, you realize that it's not for you. You have an obligation to share it for others. Sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
Right.
Oh, no problem. I've watched so many folks, including myself, come out of the Amplify course. And I think we've talked about it a couple times. We've said, a lot of it is you feel like you've kind of cleared the noise out in so many ways. You've looked at your story, you've understood how it can be used to help others, but moreover, you've gotten the tools to frame it in a way that can resonate with people instead
Mm,
of standing there and rambling, or standing there and looking at the sky, or all of the other things that we all do that are all ticks that we have that we don't realize we have. And there is so much power in being able to effectively communicate your message to your audience, and to do it knowing that you're going to be able to make a positive impact. It's huge. It's so powerful. And so I've watched the metamorphosis of myself, but even prior to being a student, I've watched it in so many of my friends and colleagues. And it's not just something that we see improving our lives and our relationships. It's a hugely impactful business tool that can be used. And so I'd love for you, I love the way you answered the first question I asked you. It's exactly why I was so excited about having you on this podcast, because mindset and attitude is everything. And the way we say the things that we say is critical. And you're right. Anybody that isn't willing to work hard is not going to make it. We know this. But those that are deserve as much guidance as we can give them. How would you tell those people that are in the grind right now, working it, consistently putting in the time every single day? What would you tell those people about how to keep pushing and how to get through to the other side?
I would say that the vision of outcome is going to be your friend, the vision of hope, because so really what we're in the search for is dopamine. Dopamine is sort of the thing that our body is moving towards, and dopamine's been misunderstood by a lot. They used to call it the reward hormone or neuromodulator, if you will. And so you'd think you'd set this big goal to achieve this big goal, and once you get it, you get this big rush of dopamine. That's actually not how it works. You set the goal to buy your dream home. Maybe it's a beach home, and you're get it. And what happens, as you're going towards the goal, dopamine is there with you, pushing you along because you can visualize this, which really tells us that the role of dopamine is it secretes in the anticipation of reward, not in the completion or the achievement of a goal. It's the anticipation. I'm about to get it. I'm about to get it. And so if you can visualize the outcome of goal, what you're doing, dopamine is that cheerleader that's pushing you along. If you can't envision the outcome, the grind is torture. In fact, that's what they say might be at the core of depression is the inability to vision a different outcome. They get stuck in one gear and this gear becomes perpetual, and then it becomes torturous, and then it becomes meaningless, and then I become helpless. And in that process, if I can now begin to visualize an outcome and actually believe it, because maybe I've had some past, it's just the inability to visualize that. And I'm not saying, well, just visualize an outcome and that's a solution. No, part of depression is the inability to be able to do that. And so we have to help people find those wins along the way, because it's the saying, okay, I had this reward. Okay, cool. Well, what's my next one? Well, if we know that the moment that you complete that task, dopamine plummets below original baseline levels. That means if you were here, it plummets to here. And so what happens is we go out and search for another one. And life begins that cycle again. And so the challenge is that anybody who achieves big things, and a lot of the listeners right now, you guys are all big achievers. That means you have what we call healthy dopamine systems, that you are rewarded in the pursuit of big goals. And if you're rewarded in the pursuit of big goals, you'll achieve big things. But here's the downside of that, or the challenge, is that those who are most capable of achieving the beach home, the big goals, the big things, are also those that are least capable of enjoying them. Because the moment you get them, dopamine is gone. And what do? You get to that beach home, you go,
Move
wow,
on.
that was great. Open up your laptop and search for the next bigger one.
On to the next
And
one.
we all know that cycle. But I think what that does is that it forces us into a different question, that in between the moments of achievement, there's this grind. And that grind passes time. And so in those moments, what's happening is actually our life. We're alive in between the moments of achievement and what we call the fleeting moments of happiness. And so I better ask myself, am I a good person? Am I doing good things during that time? Am I good in the grind? Am I a positive influence when I'm suffering? Am I somebody that is inspiring and creating hope? Or am I spreading negativity? Am I the one perpetuating the doubt? Am I the one talking about, well, this market sucks? Who are you during that time matters more. In fact, I'd venture to say that the how is more important than the why here. The why got a lot of fame. It's also greatly misunderstood. But the how is how I actually live. The how is your legacy, because your legacy is what you live, and you only are alive in the how. So I think we have to focus on who we are during those times.
Yeah, and look, I think that a lot of this also boils down to somebody's ability to push through and continue to stick with it when others give up. Um, the same goes for podcasts, right? There was a statistic I saw the other day that said that 95% of podcasts have no more than 7 episodes. So of course, they're not going to make it. What was the purpose of them putting it together to begin with? But you keep doing it and you keep doing it until it turns a point where you start getting a bigger audience. So it's that lesson that I think needs to be taken even in the mortgage business for people that are grinding it out and doing it every day, but haven't made it yet. And not getting that point where they give up, but that they push through it to reap the rewards of everything that they put into it. And the giving up is the tough thing, right? For most people, if they're not seeing the rewards, it's hard to keep going.
Yeah, and I think I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. Why does somebody not give up and somebody does? And there's also a lack of compassion in that conversation a lot. People just keep going. Well, I think that those of us who have the fortunate capability of envisioning an outcome and maybe have had a track record of success have a history of being able to say hard work equals this. Well, if you've had a track record of hard work equals nothing, hard work equals suffering, well, that's what you've been taught. And so for someone to come around and stand on a soapbox and give you platitudes of you just got to change your mindset and do this, it doesn't help anyone. It's going to be a short boost of adrenaline, but it doesn't create change. That's why I'm so not interested in being associated with motivational speaking. Just not. I want to be in transformation. I want to be in the concept and the conversation of what, even in the philosophical view of what's going on behind the scene. What truly is that trigger to manage the change at a deeper level? And how do you help somebody envision the outcome of what's going on? How do you help them create those moments of success so they can start building a track record of that? So they go, well, last time I did this, I got that. Well, what about
It
if I went a
rewards
little bit
them.
further? And I went a little
Yep.
bit further. Dr. Jordan Peterson says something profound, I think. He said, if you feel like if you're not achieving goals, then maybe you haven't set them low enough. And I was
Mm,
like, whoa, okay, hold on a
that's
second.
interesting.
He goes, what do I mean? He goes, you can always change your life, but you're probably trying to make too big of a change. What if it's instead of eating the whole bag of French fries, a whole box of fries, you have all and you just leave one today that you didn't, just one that you didn't eat. And then tomorrow you leave two. And the next day you leave three,
Incremental.
right? What if it's one less bite or you took, 10 steps today, tomorrow you take 11 steps. There's always, if you just break it down to a small, you can always improve. And it's the cumulative effect of all of those changes that creates lasting change. Too many of us are trying to do too much. And there's another great quote that says that we overestimate what we can do in a year, but we way underestimate what we can do in 2 to 3 years.
Hmm.
To me, the long-term approach is always the best. And we recently went through a big undertaking for our social media, and we hired a gentleman that was a strategist on this. We always knew we had good content, but we didn't have the right approach and the right strategy. And when I hired him, I said, I'm going to give you 3 years. And he looked at me in shock. He goes, "You're going to hire me?" I go, "I'm not going to judge your results for 3 years." And he goes, "I'm speechless. Most people want results in a few months." I said, I go, "This is a long game." And I said, to truly build a brand, it's about years. And anything that happens overnight will fall overnight. Now, granted, his third video went to and now it's over 21 million views, but it's it's a long-term approach. And I think anything is worth a craft that's worth mastering. It's worth years of effort to go into it. And so I think, you know what, I'm going to be alive for the next 30, 40, 50 years. Why not put everything I got into that? I'm going to be
Renee,
spending the
can you
time
drill down a little deeper into that? Because we
anyways.
talked about this. You've built up a large following over a short period of time using some new strategies. I think it'd be great if you could share some of that and enlighten us on what that's been like, that transformation that was not that long ago, what you had and what you have today, and where you believe you're headed in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I've done a lot of thinking about that, and I want to caveat that and say that I'm not a social media expert. I have my TikTok. There's 660 some thousand followers. We did it in about 4 months. We started over on my social on my Instagram, and that's a whole story of the mental decision and emotional decision to start over, letting go of 11 years of work and 25,000 followers. But in the 40 days that we've done that, we're at 46,000 followers,
Yep.
but they're real followers, real people, real engagement. When I say real, I'm not talking about fake. I'm talking about people that are actually interested in what we're talking about. And there's a lot of pieces. There is a formula that we use for sure. There are 4 steps to it, but I've also seen people use the same formula and it not work. And so there's other aspects to it that go into it. The formula is hook, objection, problem, solution. And so the reality is it didn't matter. And I told people all the time, what I teach and amplify does not directly correlate to short form social media content. What I teach and amplify assumes a captive audience. You're speaking in front of a room, you're running a meeting, you're the keynote speaker. It's a captive audience. Short form social media content, you have to assume you're auditioning for people's attention with every single post, and that audition lasts for 3 seconds. So the first thing you have to do is capture attention in 3 seconds. That's a hook. I've got to get you to stop the scroll. And I know that's such an overused term, but it is the reason. It is the one first goal. How can you get someone to stop the scroll? And the way that's done is by appealing to certain things, open-ended questions, things that haven't been fully answered, giving people a tangible but not answered value, meaning here's the number one thing leaders are getting wrong in 2023. Oh, okay, well, what's that one thing? And the piece to that too is that so I think what makes it even better is when you get this part two, which would be called the objection, or we call preempting the potential objection. And so if I were to tell you, let's say I use the uh, the hook of being, here's how the rich avoid paying taxes. So, I might stop and go, what's that? But then internally, how might I object to that? Oh, okay, that's got to be illegal.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can answer that question before your brain even goes to that, that's sales 101. So I have two parts to my hook. It's the hook and then the preemptive objection, which would be, here's
Mm-hmm.
how the rich avoid paying taxes. And don't worry, what I'm about to share with you is perfectly legal. So I stopped the scroll, I covered your objection. Now I go into problem definition. What most people do is do X, Y, and Z. I define the problem. And I should be articulate and authoritative in my response and my tone in how I do that. And it should elicit the response of, man, that's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go, instead, try this solution, part 4. And I give this tip. Now, can you do that in less than 60 seconds? That's not easy. We spend 90% of our time writing hooks. That's the first sentence, 2 sentences phrase, and 10% on the content. Where
Hmm.
people, they think they hook, they're not hooking. And here's how you know if you're hooking correctly: are people watching your videos? If they're
Mm-hmm.
not, your hooks suck.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to surrender to that. If they're watching them, the hooks work. If they're not, they don't. I say, yeah, we know hooks all the time. I'm like, well, why do you have 300 views? Why do you have 48 views? It's not right. It's not correct. And I spent years, I've been in that game for over 3 years just trying to figure that out. So people are like, wow, it happened overnight in 4 months. I said, no, 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 no. One, it's been 30 years of content creation, writing a best-selling book, I spent 234 days speaking this last year. 234 days. I was on over, and now this would be the 60th podcast guest appearance this year. And that's a lot of, and that doesn't include virtual events. That's a lot of practice in articulating your message. And so there's that piece of it. And then you implement a formula to it. But it's like, well, I can't do that. Well, no, maybe not right away you can't. But I've been doing this for years and I sucked at it for years, but I stayed at it. And so then now it happens like overnight. Like, no, excuse my language. Fuck you. It wasn't overnight. And nor do you want it to be overnight. You don't want it. Learn to enjoy the process of building something over time that actually has a solid foundation. So when the wind blows, it doesn't blow over. It's still
Yeah.
there. Like people are worried about time. I'm not scared at all about what's going on right now.
So it's those four elements, but there's more to it than that, isn't there? There's the way that you videotape it. I'm noticing the zooming in and zooming out. Like, can you give us a little
Yeah.
bit more?
So you have to have the right creative behind it, right? Brad Lee talks about his content flow. One is you have to have a source. If you don't follow Brad, you got to follow him. The guy's brilliant. You know, he comes across harsh on his social, but his social media strategy is brilliant. First, you got to have a source of content. So right now, you guys are creating your source, which is this. Every time either of you speak, you should have a camera on you that covers everything you say. And every time you're saying something, you can clip that up. That is a source. Every time you're on a podcast, I've got a camera that's in front of me right here, and I got a camera that's right there. And this
Mm-hmm.
camera is a voyeuristic camera. It's like capturing me as I work. So I've done 3 podcasts today. That means I have 3 hours worth of this that I'm doing right now. And so then all I do is I take that chip and I hand it over to somebody. And that team then goes and they mine it for content. They mine it in the sense of what's trending, what's working, what's within Rene's brand. Because there's a lot of things that are trending, but that aren't part of my brand, and we don't put them out there.
Sure.
There's a lot of things that would capture attention, but there's a strict rule, and they hate me for it. If it's not part of my brand, I don't care if it's going to get a lot of content and conversation. I don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes I'll do things that out of context sound pretty bad. Like fuck you when I said that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they'll some people will take that and put that as the hook, and it's just not how I always want to come across. Now, that may come across good. I don't know, but they know. Like, for example, I lost 40 pounds, 40, 50 pounds, something like that. And, the creative, they went there and says, what losing 100 pounds did to my perspective? And I called them up furious. I said, 100 pounds. I said, remove that shit now. He went, well, I thought, wasn't it 100 pounds? I'm like, no, it was like 40. It was why I just did a little creative freedom. I'm like, no, I just remove it. So we took it down immediately. It had like already 10, 12,000 views. And it was within the first hour. Remove,
Crazy.
Well,
right? Not worth
yeah.
it. So we reposted it and put the right number. Did it do as well? Nope. But was it in line with integrity? Yeah. So I feel a lot better about it. And so protecting that piece.
Some
So
politicians could
capturing
use
the
that.
content. Say that again?
Some politicians could use that.
Oh, God.
And-
Yeah.
So capturing is one thing. And then having a team. Now, the same team that did that is genius because they're the ones that capture all the other stuff. And you have to edit in how today's world is. It's in short clips, removing as much of the space as possible so it still sounds natural, but keeps it moving. The cuts, jump cuts in, jump cuts out, keeps the eye engaged. This is all basic psychology. And in today's world, of course, using sounds that are trending, you'll hear a lot of the text message sound, bing, that because
Okay.
that triggers dopamine for us, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's the anticipation of reward? It could be a good text.
Yep.
It could be a good message, and so that ding triggers dopamine immediately. And so if they ding me during my talk, I'm getting dopamine from the message, no matter what it is. So I'm creating that association.
Interesting.
So they're using all sorts of stuff. So the editing matters. You have to have a team that's done it.
So this is the team you hired that's doing this.
Yes. I hired a team that also lives it.
How did you find them?
Well, so here, I'll explain that in a second. What I mean by living it, I've had a lot of people say, well, I'm a social media coach. And I say, great. Let me look at your social media. Well, I'm like, here's the thing. Whether or not it's true or not, you might be talented in the world, but if you've got 400 followers and you're a social media coach, it's not working. You haven't lived this. Because trust me, I know what it's like to spend years putting hundreds of thousands of dollars into video and getting 48 views.
Mm-hmm.
I know what that's like. And until you understand and you can show me that you've done it, I'm not listening. Also, check your social media people for purchased followers. If they've got 25,000 followers and their videos are in 100 views, they don't have 25,000 followers. They just don't. And, there was a time where a lot of us made that mistake. I didn't consciously make that mistake, but we had a group that ran our social media and they put us in part of a campaign to get attention. So we didn't buy followers. We bought attention, just like an ad would. So we got a bunch of followers that never engaged. And so my views would never go anywhere. That's why we started over. I said, I want to just start from scratch and I want to know if this process really works. And shit, it worked. And so vet out your people. The guys that do my stuff, they already have 150,000 followers personally themselves. And so I'm like, okay, these guys get it. And I've watched them do it over and over again. So yeah, there's a lot.
Did you find them in an ad or how did you locate them?
So you guys probably know Neil Dingra, Neil Home. So Neil is I've been friends with his family for years. So I've known him before he was Neil. And when he started over, because he did the same thing, 2.5 years ago. And he said, I'm starting over. I'm like, dude, why would you do that? He goes, no, I want to try this formula. I want to do this organically. And it was just awesome. And I didn't pay attention to him for a whole year. And during that year, he grew his following to over 100,000 followers. And when he was about 90,000 followers, I said, all right, we're going to do 3 videos together. Because the whole time he'd been begging me to do something. I wasn't listening. And he said, we're going to do something. You're going to do 3 of my videos. And if they do better than my other ones, I'll put you on my AmpCon stage. He said, bet. We did 3 videos. They were in the 1,600%, increase. It was just insane. And I'm like, okay, sold, put you on there. And so through his network, I found Mo Ishmael, who's ridiculous. You could try to hire him. He's too busy. I mean, this guy he's a unicorn in what he's doing. And it's not in, he's got an editing team. It's his ability to look at what's going on. Just like Neil, what makes Neil so good is his ability to know what's trending and his ability to take what's boring and make it interesting. And so he takes mortgage information, makes it very interesting. He takes market and economic information and makes it interesting to the consumer and has a mass appeal to it. And those of people that, well, it's just basic stuff. I'm like, yeah, it's basic, but it's understandable and approachable to people so much that they'll actually watch it. That's the difference. And so you got to have a strategic approach to what the consumer wants, not a way to show off your knowledge. And there's stylistic things, in terms of approachability, tone of voice. Now, you'll hear Neil talk about having a stance on something, be more polarizing and saying, this is what I believe, and taking a stance on something. And that tends to drive a lot more attention too. So there's a lot of different things, but just, I tell people, get in a game, start learning, start making mistakes as soon as possible.
Yeah. So
Mistakes are the best way to learn. My music teacher used to tell us to make big mistakes. Don't make small ones. They're not worth it. So I heard Renee bring up Brad Lee, which brings me to a conversation we were having about a
yeah,
quote that
I did.
that you had in
About
mind.
stupid questions.
Renee said there are a
Yeah.
lot of people asking stupid questions out there, but stupid questions are an
Can be
opportunity to give rich answers.
They
Give us
are.
an example of how people out there listening could take a stupid question and turn it into a really rich conversation of value.
Well, I think that, we call that the question trap, right? The question trap has three components to it. One is that you have to understand that most people don't put much thought into the questions that they ask. And, how are you doing? Oh, I'm good. Good. It's sort of this robotic thing that we all go into. I fall into it as well. We all do that. Another one would be, so who are you? What do you do? What makes you unique? And those questions. And I'm trying to figure out really how do you add value to my life and business, depending on the context, right? Or I'm just trying to pass time and connect in some way, shape, or form. I'm trying to get to know who you are. Another one is, what's your rate? God, what a horrible question. And here's why it's horrible. It's horrible because it's sad. And it's sad because if they're asking what the rate is, that means they don't know what else to ask. And you guys know this better than I do, and the listeners know this better than I do, that the rate is so irrelevant in what's going on. The value created is the conversation. Rates are going to go up, and people make money no matter what the rate is. Now, will rates make it harder? Will you get the easy deals? No. But so what? That's why people that came in and started during this, booming time are ruined, because they're going to go, wow, this time sucks. So no, this is actually normal. If you can withstand this, I know people that are saying, well, I'm going to wait for the next money grab. That's what they call them, right? And because they can withstand these times, and not only withstand it, they can still thrive in times like this. And then when rates drop again, they're going to go in and they got better systems, they got more money, they've got more scale, and they're going to go in, they're going to grab all the deals and go retire. And so those aren't normal business times. These are normal business times. Notice I'm also setting a narrative. And so that question of, what's your rate, or what does it cost if you're a real estate agent, what's your commission? Who cares what the commission is? How soon can what value can you create to me? How can this home help me contribute to my long-term wealth? Those are great questions. And so you may be asked what the interest rate is, but you got to be able to ask in a rich manner. So somebody might say, so what's your rate? And here's a response I might give. I'm sorry. One, you got to be really, the tone of voice. Jamie, why don't you role play with me on this? You'll be asking me rate, and I want you to pay attention to the tone in which I answer the question, and also the timing of the interruptions that I engage in. Okay. So you ask me, so Renee, I'm the loan officer. You're the whoever consumer.
Okay, Renee, what's your rate on a 30-year fix today?
Oh, that's a great question. So Jamie, are you looking for a quoted rate or a locked rate?
Oh, what's the difference?
So I was going to ask you, are you familiar with the difference?
I don't know. I was on Bank of America's website. I saw a 5% rate today at no cost.
Awesome. If I'm going to make one more question and assumption, I'm assuming you're looking for a rate that you can actually calculate a payment. Is that correct?
Yeah, I definitely want to know what my payment's going to look like.
Awesome. So then what you're looking for is a locked rate. So let's pause there. So notice there are three things that just happened. She asked a question. I responded instead of defensively, positively. Awesome. Right? So if I can validate immediately the stupid question, then because the typical consumer is expecting some level of resistance or some dance. Awesome. Are you looking? I'm going to ask a question. Are you looking for a locked rate or a quoted rate? And I know it's my rate. I'm like, there's this positive, this upbringing, this brightness into the voice. And because I'm already moving forward, I want to answer your question. I want to make sure I answer the real one. But I'm also asking a question that I already know you don't know the answer to, but it's also educating you that there's a difference. There is a locked rate and the quoted rate. And you and I and everybody listening knows that quoted rates are bullshit, because they're going to change. And so when I get back to this, like, and then she's going to be like, and then I interrupt right there. Are you familiar with the difference? Not like, are you familiar with the difference? Not condescending, but are you familiar with the difference? Well, actually not. Make it safe for them to say, no, I'm not familiar. That's the thing. You have to make it safe. And that's, you have to create, like, it's open and validating, and so you're coaching them. Say, no problem. Actually, most people don't know the difference. This mortgage industry is wild, let me tell you. And so the difference is a quoted rate is anything I say right now and anything anybody you call can say right now. But a locked rate is the only way you can actually calculate the actual payment. And you can't lock the rate without a few things happening first. And so if we want to get to a locked rate so you can calculate your payment, would you mind if I ask you a few questions?
Sure.
Wonderful. So now I've moved on beyond that. So bad question, rich answer. I've educated them, I've kept them in the loop, but I've also told them what's really going on.
And I
It's
trust
very
you a
good.
lot more because you asked me questions that the last three people I called didn't even think to ask me. So now you've got some credibility. And I feel like if I'm going to ask somebody about payments and what I qualify for, this person sounds like he knows what he's doing. It
Yeah.
doesn't make me feel stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
fantastic. That's very good. I've had over the years has originated a lot of loans, and when people ask that question, I tend to educate them. Um, Not quite as eloquently as you did there, but I first point out that asking that question is very similar to asking what the weather is like in the United States. There's no way to answer that. I've got to know, where do you live? What time of year? So I've got to ask you a few questions before I can give you that answer. Do you have a few minutes?
Love it.
And that's how I get into it. But that was very good. That was worth the price of admission right there.
Yeah, it's really about, what is it about, right? Connecting with people, and the difference between an order taker and a person that doesn't get to the why behind the question. What does a home buyer really want? They want to know if they can afford this house. That's the
Yeah.
bottom line. It's our
Yeah.
job to figure out if they qualify for it. They want to know if they can afford it. What's the payment? What am I writing a check for, or drafting to a bank every month? What is it? It's our job to tell them. It's their job to figure out if that's doable for them or not. And with rates being moving targets, it's all about the education piece of it, really, for all of us. And that's what we tell all of our team members here at the mortgage company.
Renee, I'm curious, how did you actually wind up being somebody that advises in the mortgage business?
So what's interesting is that mortgage and real estate dominate a lot of my social media, but my clients extend far beyond that. And so, like I think I spoke at five or six Vistage executive summits. Vistage is the largest consortium of CEOs in the world. So there's, you get 500-600 different CEOs, all different industries. 3M was a client for a long time. Cargill, the largest privately held company in the world, is a client currently. So we work with all sorts of clients. But back in 9/11, we lost the week after 9/11. We lost $1 million contract, and I had to fire 25 people. We were doing 55 workshops a month across the country at this point. I had
Wow.
37 consultants doing this work, and we were rolling. I mean, it was crazy. And right after 9/11, oil prices went up, and in manufacturing, the oil prices go up, the cost of manufacturing goes way up, and they have to cut expenses, SG&A costs, all that stuff. And one of those big costs would be training. And we were $1 million expense that they nipped right in the bud. And that was all our cash for the next 8 months. So I had to fire 24 people in a day. And these were very close friends, very people that were like family, that worked together for a long time. Very, very hard day. And I remember at that point going, okay, so here I'm the CEO of this company that's nothing now. What am I going to do? And I remember back to a conversation when I was 18 years old after I got cut from the basketball team. I asked the CEO, he asked me how my basketball career was going, and I said, it's over. And I said, but I have one question for you. What's the one thing I have to do now to be in your shoes when I get older? And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, you learn how to sell. If you learn how to sell, you'll always be employed. And at 18 years old, I didn't understand what that meant. I just knew I needed to go sell. So I went, I got hired selling cookware door to door. So that word, the voice came back to me and said, okay, we just lost this contact. I need to go sell. So I called a friend of mine who I knew was just making a killing in the mortgage industry, Greg Bertagnoli. And I said, hey, dude, I go, I might need to come work for you. I go, how does this mortgage thing work? And he said, oh my God, get over here. And he was so excited. And I walked in and I said, okay, show me your sales order. He goes, sales order? We don't do sales order. He goes, we fill this out. And he hands me this thing with 1,003 pages. I'm like, you have 1,003 pages on an application? And he goes, no, 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 no. It's called a 1003. And I'm like, oh, all right. So it's 4 pages, the 5th page as well, too, the page 5 of the 1003. And I go, okay. So I gave him a highlighter. I said, fill out what you want filled out. This is 2001. And he goes, why? I go, just fill it out. So he goes, just need this, and that. I said, you just need that, fill it out, and you can quote rates. He said, yeah. I said, great. I put them in a sheet protector. I grabbed a stack of them. I said, I'll see you tomorrow. And he goes, what are you doing? I said, I'll see you tomorrow. I come back with 9 of them filled out. He's like, what the hell did you do? I just ask people if they want to save money on their mortgage. I told him, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I got a team that will analyze this. You fill out the yellow parts and I'll tell you if you can save money. And they all said yes. And he goes, all right. I go, so what's next? He goes, well, we got to price your loans. I'm like, what do you mean price your loans? Well, we got to choose the interest rate. I'm like, you can choose the interest rate? He goes, I thought bankrate.com said that. And he starts laughing at me. He goes, no. He goes, follow me. Now, granted, this is the time they were paying commissions. And we were a broker, by the way. And he said, he was promised me an 80% commission. And so I'm going, okay. He gets there and he goes to the fax machine, pulls out the big thing with all these numbers. And I'm just like, what are all those numbers? Like, 0.375 percentage. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? He goes, let's grab your first loan. He grabs it from a buddy of mine. It's $978,000 loan. And he goes, why don't we price this at 2.75 on the back and 1 on the front? I'm like, what are you, 2.75%? Dude, you promised me 80%. I go, see, I knew I couldn't trust you. And I'm just mad at him. He's like, René, calm down. I'm like, no, dude. He goes, and I go, back of what? I don't know what you're talking about. If you haven't been in the business long enough, you know what I'm talking about.
Yep, that's right.
But he goes back and he goes, get your calculator. And I said, okay. Grab my calculator. He goes, $978,000. I type it in. And he goes, multiplied by, we're going to go 2.75 on the back, yield spread premium, plus a 1% origination fee. I'm like, I don't know what the hell you're saying. He goes, just 3 times 3.75%. Yeah. He goes, 80% of that number. I'm like, you're going to pay me $37,000 for filling out that sheet of paper? He goes, welcome to the mortgage business. Mm-hmm. And the rest is history. And so that is how I was introduced to it. And very quickly, I realized I did not like being an originator, but he had 60 loan officers that weren't trained. They were all order takers, as Jamie's talked about. And I said, what if we turn these guys into salespeople? And he said, love it. So I came up with 27 courses. We did one every other week. First time 4 people showed up. It took me 2 weeks to do it. They said it was crazy. Can I do it again the next week? 10 people showed up. They said, can I bring our realtors? 20 people showed up. Within 6 months, we have 110 people standing room only doing these courses. And all I did was write down the things I'd learned in selling. And 7 months into it, a friend of mine by the name of Eric Mitchell comes up to me and he said, you changed my life. You made me sign a contract to lose weight. We did a course called Overcoming Procrastination. I lost 25 pounds. I had a heart attack 2 months ago. He goes, you changed my life. You saved my life, and I want to repay the favor. I'm like, you don't have to. He goes, no, I'm going to repay the favor. He goes, have you ever heard of Barry Habib, Greg Frost, Todd Duncan, Tim Brahim, and Dave Savage? I'm like, no. He goes, well, I need you to be the 6th one up there. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. He said, well, you're coming with me. So he brought me out to meet Tim Brahim of Loan Toolbox at the time. We hit it off, and I helped design business plan 2008, was on stage. And so that was kind of like my big sort of entry into the mortgage industry.
I love that your story begins with doing the right thing for people, and that by doing the right thing for a person, doing something that you had no idea would wind up impacting them personally, that they came back and said, let me do you one. And the next thing you knew, that speaks to the importance of relationships and being a good human being. And I've been really blessed to personally experience a lot of that over the last few years of my, my career and my time in this industry as of late. And so it's just, it's really cool to see other good human beings out there doing good things, all the way back in the day. And even now I see you do it all the time. I see you give of yourself to people all the time. Very few times have I ever seen, a person who is as visible as you are be as giving of themselves as you have been to others when they need help. And I just appreciate knowing you, brother. I really do.
I appreciate that. I tell people, somebody said, well, I appreciate you coming today. So there was a keynote. I'm like, you appreciate me? I said, you know how silly I look with an empty audience? I appreciate you being here, because I've been on most of my stages. I've been to empty audiences, and I don't forget that.
Well, I'd like to get into just one more subject before we wrap it up. So we found out, how your business career started. It started with the ending of your basketball career. I assume because you were 100 pounds overweight at the time. No, that wasn't it.
No.
But how
So
did you?
I gained the weight after that.
Okay. Well, the coach says, Renee, you're gonna have to lose weight. You're off the team. Um, how did you get into neuroscience?
Mm. So now it would have been over 30 years ago. Yeah, it would have been 1992 or 1. My mother had me look in a room and she said, Renee, what does everybody here have in common? And I looked around, I couldn't figure it out. She said, Renee, everybody here has a brain. And if you can understand how the brain works, life, business, relationships, everything becomes easier. And the the idea of understanding how to communicate a difficult idea and how to sell a difficult idea was something that was always intriguing to me. My mother would talk to me. She says, Renee, the work that she did, she was a former nun, and she said, we're getting people to understand things like emotional intelligence before it was even out. I mean, we're getting people to talk about emotions. And when I graduated college, I went to school for behavioral neuroscience. And so it was actually 17 years old. So it was even more than that. And she did that. Um, I went there to understand. And I remember my dissertation was on human emotion, and there was nothing written. People didn't understand emotion. Emotion is a normal conversation now, but back then nobody wanted to talk about emotion, especially in business. There was no research on emotional intelligence. There wasn't any research on what's happening with employee engagement and how the emotional leader and servant leader. None of that shit. It was just like Jack Welch, cut the bottom 10%, and good to great, get them right on the bus. I mean, this is not good business books. Sorry for those that love Good to Great. You probably read the first chapter, and if you read the first chapter, you're going to quote me on getting right seats to the right bus and all that stuff. But can you implement anything in that book? No, you can't,
Right.
because it's just a historical documentation of things you can't replicate. But now, interesting book, absolutely. But anyways, I digress. But back then there wasn't anything on that, and so for me, I wanted to study that, and I was always fascinated with the application of the neuroscience. I wasn't smart enough to be the researcher. I could understand it. I could read the research, and I understood the brain, and I understood its effects, but that wasn't my passion. My passion was, so what does that mean to me? How can that help me close this next deal? How does it help me resolve this conflict, communicate a little bit better, stand a little bit taller, be able to talk to that girl a little bit better? What are the applications of this research? And that was my relentless passion.
Amazing.
I think that's amazing. Your mom was a former nun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank God she's not anymore.
Huh.
Thank God she quit for my
Very
sake, right?
interesting. You're right.
Yeah.
That's right.
He's got some amazing stories.
I bet.
This one. He does.
Yeah.
He definitely does.
Awesome. Well, I've really enjoyed the time we spent together, Renee.
So have I. It's been
Yeah.
amazing.
Thank you so much.
Any
Pleasure's
final
mine.
thoughts?
No, I think, one, thank you for what you guys are doing. I think that this industry right now is the time to lead. Right now is the time to push harder. Right now is the time to communicate more. Right now is the time to do this more often. I'd say do this twice as many times as you want to. Keep the conversations going. You guys are setting a narrative each time you do this. You guys are controlling and helping, even if it's just one person, push harder, communicate more, make more phone calls. Figure out, if you are down about the market, then figure out a way to turn that around for yourself. If you want to set the tone for the room, you got to set the tone internally first of what that is, because
Right.
you're going to set the tone for the room is what you feel inside. We are all transfers of emotion, whether we want to be or not. And so pay attention to who we are, what we think, and be careful of what you say, and be a loud voice of possibility right now. Be a loud voice of reason. Help people have perspective in times like this, because right now perspective is going to keep them going. So don't give in to the media and what they're doing. Don't give in to anybody who's saying that now is going to be, whatever. And be okay with suffering. Be okay with a little bit of tough stuff. We suffer in the gym so that we feel better and we live a longer life. We suffer in the kitchen so we can be happier. Suffering is the way to success, period.
Yeah, we very passionately do that with our team and help them to focus on the good things so that when we emerge out of this, they're that much stronger.
Amen to
Seed
that.
Final
planting
question?
time. Yeah, it's seed planting time. Final question. Ooh. What would you tell 20-year-old Renee if you had a chance to have a talk with him?
Save more money, work out harder, and eat better.
Very good. Love
Very
that.
good advice.
Yep.
Seriously, it is literally that simple.
Very simple. It is very simple. That's right. Very good. Well, thanks again, Renee.
Thanks, Renee.
It's been our pleasure. I'm sure we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. It was an honor to be on here.
All right.
Get Real 411 is hosted by Brad Rice and Jamie Cavanaugh, produced by Stuart Gelin, and recorded live from the AmeriFund Home Loan Studio in Simi Valley, California. You can learn more about the show at getreal411.com and watch full episodes on YouTube. If you're interested in being a guest on Get Real 411, email booking@getreal411.com. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.